how to recreate a blueprint in Fusion 360. The part that we're going to be recreating for our drawing today is our Titan 1M. What we are going to do is actually kind of combine all three sheets of the Titan 1M into one sheet. So first, let's take a look at our reference blueprint that we're going to be recreating. Sheet number 1 has kind of our outside dimensions to it. Sheet number 2 has our hole locations and our hole dimensions. And then sheet number 3 has the dimensions of our irregular shaped pocket and then also the notch in the front of the part. So let's jump over to Fusion 360 and recreate this drawing. Over in Fusion 360, you need to make sure that you have your part loaded up and your part is currently saved. If your part is not saved, Fusion 360 will not allow you to create a drawing from it, so you do need to make sure that's saved first. We're going to come up and change our workspace. We're going to click on Design and go down to Drawing from Design. In our pop-up window over here, the very first thing it says, do you want to reference everything that's in this modeling workspace? So imagine if you had a huge assembly in here and you only wanted to make a drawing of one or two of the components, you could uncheck this and actually click on individual components out of that assembly. For this example, we're going to leave that checked. We are going to be creating a new drawing. And then lastly, we are going to be using our title block that we created in another lesson. And then we're going to press OK. All right, so very first thing, notice that we are using our title block that we previously designed in another lesson. What we're going to be landing first is Fusion 360 wants us to land a base view. Well, on this particular part, our base view is actually the top of our part. So I'm going to go to our pop-up window here and click on Top. And notice now we have the top of our part. Underneath our orientation, we have Style. This particular part, I only want to see visible edges. And then I'm going to change my scale to 1:1. So if I was to actually print this off in a inkjet or laser printer, and I took a tape measure to it or a ruler, I could actually measure this part out, and for the most part, it will measure 4 inches long by 1 inch 900 thousandths wide. We're going to land our base view kind of in the upper left-hand corner, and then press OK. Now that you have your base view, we're going to add in a section view. We're going to go to Drawing Views, go to Section. We're going to click on the top as our parent view. We're going to land in our section view kind of to the left of this bolt hole down here. So we're going to left click again, and then press Enter. So Fusion 360, for the most part, follows the rules of third angle projection, unless you change that to first angle projection. So if I drag my mouse over to the left, this will be a left-handed view. If I drag my mouse over to the right, this will be a right-handed view. So we're going to drag our mouse to the right, left click, and then press OK. Notice in our section view here, we can actually see the inside of our pocket and we can see the inside of our notch. At any point, if you made a mistake, you can actually click on your section lines and you can drag these around, and your pictogram here for your section view will update. The very next view that we're going to put in is our isometric view, which will land over here in our upper right hand corner. We're going to go back to Drawing Views, this time to Projected View. We're going to click on the top of our part and drag our mouse over. If you kind of position it up at an angle here, this will give you your isometric view. Notice at this angle here, we can't see that ledge where the notch resides. So we're actually going to move ours down to this location. We're going to left click and press enter. So notice at this location, we can actually see that there is a ledge here. This is a common mistake, especially for students, where they assume that that feature will go all the way through the part. We want to change the visibility of this to a kind of like a grayscaled part. So we're going to double left click on it, and we're going to change this to a shaded with visible lines, and then close that out. If your part is overlapping your title block, that's okay. We're going to click on it. In the center square, we can actually drag this up into a location that's better suited for us. Now that we have our three views in place, we're going to add in our measurements. Let's look at our section view first. Our section view is probably going to be the easiest one to add our measurements in. We're going to go to dimensions and down to ordinate dimensions. We're going to zoom on in, and we're going to be referencing this line on the very left hand side. So we're going to click on this endpoint of that line and then drag our mouse up, giving us our 0 location, our datum location. Next line that we are going to choose is the bottom of our pocket. We're going to click on it, and then we're going to reference off of the endpoint of our extension line and drag that back. This will enable all of our measurements to be in a line. Lastly, we're going to go to the bottom of the part. Same thing, we're referencing, trying to get that alignment in place. Notice one thing, the annotations of our drawing are not correct. They're not representing what the original drawing looked like. In the bottom center down here, we're going to click on annotation settings. Very first thing that we are going to check is display trailing zeros. And then we're going to go to linear dimension precision and go to 1, 2, 3, which is the thousands column. After you change that, notice our 0 location has these 3 trailing zeros. I'm going to double click on it and change its primary precision to just 0. And then close out that pop-up window. Both our pocket and this notch share that 500 thousandths dimension. So I'm going to update this to say that both of them share that. I'm going to double left click on it, and I'm going to move my cursor in front of these brackets and type in 2x and then the space bar, indicating that there are 2 features that share that measurement. Our section view is all updated now. Let's go over to our top view. And this one's going to be a little bit harder to do. We're going to go back to dimensions, back to ordinate dimension. We're going to come in to the very upper left-hand corner. This time, because of our radius here, we want to choose a theoretical location where these 2 lines intersect here. Fusion 360 allows us to do this. We can actually come to the endpoints of our arc and hover over that endpoint for a couple seconds, and then move to the other endpoint, and then move our mouse over, and you'll see these green lines appear. Once those green lines intersect, we can click and then drag out our mouse. Now that our datum is landed, we're going to click from the other location and drag our mouse over. Same thing as before, we're going to change our primary precision just to 0 on both of these. And this one, I'm actually going to drag this up a little bit, giving a little bit longer extension line. Now that we have those measurements in, let's take a look at our hole geometry first. This will be a little bit easier to understand. We're going to go back to ordinate dimension. and we're going to reference off the center location of our holes. I'm going to left click, and again I'm referencing back to the end location of our measurement, and I'm going to click there. We're going to move on, referencing off of here, and this time I'm actually going to put a little bend in this particular measurement to get it away from our section lines. We're going to come down to the center here and drag this over off the next one. Just like that. Now that we have our horizontal measurements in place, we're going to add the vertical measurements the same exact way. So now all of our holes are dimensioned. We're going to come in and add some relationships, statements to these. So for example, this hole and this hole both share the same horizontal measurement. So I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to indicate that by 2x and then press enter. So both of these holes share that measurement. I'm going to repeat that over here, 2x and enter. Same thing doing our vertical measurements. We're going to update those. Just like that. Now that we have our hole locations in, we're going to start adding some geometry locations. Back to ordinate dimension. First geometry location that we're going to reference is the innermost portion of our line here, which makes up our pocket. I'm going to click on that endpoint of that arc, and I'm going to drag our mouse up right there. We're going to jump over to this side to that endpoint of that arc and drag our mouse up. And then lastly, since we're over here, we're going to do the outermost portion of our rectangle. And drag our mouse up and kind of put a little bend in there. Now that we have our horizontal measurements in place, we're going to add in our vertical measurements. Just like that. Now, pretty much we have all of our measurements in. Now we're going to start looking at some of these radiuses in here, because we do have to add some dimensions to those. So for example, there's a radius here, or a circle here. This circle has a center location that we need to represent. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to ordinate dimension, and we're going to try to find that center of that circle. And there it is. You see how we have a green circle with a plus sign inside of it, and then Fusion 360 is popping up with that window that says center. We're going to click on it and drag our mouse over, and I'm going to land this measurement kind of on top of my other measurement. Just like that. I'm going to move this other measurement so we can actually read it a little bit better. So now that we have this measurement in place, we also need to do a horizontal measurement. Well, I'm making an assumption here, and we can double check it in Fusion, but I believe the center location here is also the center location of this hole. With that in mind, our extension line will actually run from this feature through that hole all the way to the top. With that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this dimension and delete it. And then I'm going to add in this dimension here, which will represent both of those features. Back to ordinate dimension. We're going to go to the center here and drag that up and referencing off our previous measurements. And as I mentioned before, notice how our measurement and our extension line goes right through the center of that hole. So that actually dimension both of those features at the same time. Now that we have that in place, what we're going to do is we're going to add in some of our GD&T symbols. So for example, this 2 inches here, that is the center line of our part. So we're going to double click on it. I'm going to hit the space bar and then go to insert symbol and over to center line for our center line symbol, and then close that out. This is a good opportunity to kind of clean up your workspace. Some of our measurements are kind of jumbled up on each other. So for example, this 2 150 thousandths, we can actually kind of put a bend in that and get that over a little bit. Same thing with this 300 thousandths. Just kind of clean up the workspace so it's easily read. It's looking better. All right. So now that we have some of our, pretty much all of our linear dimensions in, we're going to add in some radiuses. We're going to go to D on the keyboard, or you can always go to dimensions, down to dimensions. And this time what we're going to reference off of, this arc right here. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to drag our mouse up and kind of place our leader line through the part here. We're going to do the arc on the very top the same exact way, drag our mouse up and position that up there. While we're here, we're going to hit this arc here. Make sure you're clicking on the lower portion or the innermost line, and we're going to drag this one over to the bottom here like this. And then lastly, what we're going to put in is the width of this offset here for our web. We're going to click on the innermost line and then the outermost line. And almost forgot a measurement, and that's okay, is we got to reference our corner radius here. So we're going to click on the corner radius and drag that out. Now that we have our dimensions in place, we're going to update them. For example, we're going to double click on this one and update that, indicating that there are 4 features that share that measurement. We're going to update this 300 thousandths with TYP, meaning that is typical, meaning the entire part has that same offset measurement. And then this radius here of 313 thousandths, there are 2 features that share that measurement. Again, you can drag these around and kind of organize your space. The main thing is you want to be able to have this clearly stated so anybody can read these and they understand what is being asked for. Coming up here, notice how some of these measurements are all jumbled up on this linear measurement. I'm going to take this linear measurement, put a nice big bend in it, bring this over here, and give me some room to work with. Currently, there are 13 features that share this 195 thousandths measurement. So I'm going to update that with a 13x. And then I'm going to drag this measurement down and kind of get it out of the way so I can better read it there. And then I'm going to reposition this 188 thousandths kind of over in this area. That's looking pretty good. The last thing that we are going to do on this particular part is we're going to use our call out for our bolt holes. To put this in, we're going to go to text with the leader. We're going to click on the innermost circle here and drag out a leader line. There are 7 holes, so we're going to indicate that there are 7 of those. These holes all use a 1032 unified fine class 2B thread. I'm going to hit the return button, giving us another line. Our threads, we want these to go down 380 thousandths minimum. So we're going to go to our pop-up window here where it says symbols, and we're going to use the GD and T symbol for depth. I'm going to hit the enter button again and go back to our symbols, and we're going to use the GD and T symbol for countersink. So the countersink diameter is 205 thousandths. And that will be at 45, and then the degree symbol. After you've typed all that information in, we're going to close that out. And again, we can move this around to whatever location we want it to be at. Notice that my section view here is kind of overlapping that, and that's okay. I'm going to drag that over and kind of free up some space for us. I can also free up some space by moving our top view over a little bit. And again, it's all kind of what the person who's modeling and laying out these blueprints, what they are looking for. This is a good opportunity. Double check to make sure you got the part fully defined. This part is looking actually really good. Let me double check my blueprint. And the only other thing that looks like we're missing is we're missing an angular measurement from here to here. This is why we double check our print. We're going to come in, D on the keyboard. We're going to click on this line segment here, and then this other line segment. And we're going to drag our measurement in between. Afterwards, we can always move this around like this. And there are 2 entities that share that measurement, so we're going to put 2x in. And we can again move this around depending on how you want it to appear. I'm going to position mine kind of like that. Again, double check your blueprint and make sure that you've got everything fully defined on here. And I believe we are done on this print. Last thing that we're going to look at is we're going to check out our title block. We're going to come down to our material here. And so we're going to double click on the actual wire portion of the title block. This will allow us to alter our attributes. Our material for this part is 6061 T6 aluminum. We don't have a drawing number for this particular part, but we are going to update our revision. And one thing that you can do is if you have somebody who's checking your blueprint, you can actually enter their name in here and then the date. And then if you have like a manager or somebody else, they can actually sign off for it here. We don't have those people in place, so we're going to hit OK. And our blueprint's pretty much done. We're going to save this blueprint, and then you can also output it as a PDF. Once you output it as a PDF, this blueprint can be printed off. This concludes our tutorial on how to create a blueprint for the Titan 1M.